Australia's housing crisis has been laid bare today, with the new report revealing affordability is at its worst in 30 years.
Australia's housing market is going through an incredibly difficult time as home ownership becomes more and more expensive. With home prices going through the roof, it's getting harder and harder to find a place to live. People are in fierce competition every week for the few homes that are available. They often feel overwhelmed and down in the dumps because the rental problem is getting worse as well. So, let's dive into the root cause of this problem, which can also help us in finding a solution, if one exists at all. In Australia's busy towns, the average price of a house is getting closer and closer to a crazy $1 million. When you compare this number to normal incomes, it becomes even scarier. For instance, in the last few decades, house prices have quadrupled, but wages have only doubled. And if we have a look at the price-to-income ratio, which is a key way to figure out how affordable housing is, things become even more clear. So, ideally, this number should be between 3 and 5 times a person's yearly income. For example, if you make $50,000 a year, you should be able to look for a house in the $150,000 to $250,000 range. If we take a look at the average pay of an Australian, it comes down to about $74,000 a year. Jobs for new graduates generally start at $59,525 a year, and those with more experience can make up to $116,979 a year. On the other hand, the average price of a home in all of Australia's capital towns was $882,006 back in June 2023. This has only gone up since then. Similarly, the median price of a unit in the major cities was $629,862, while the median price of a home in the suburbs is $586,645. Australia's housing problem often sparks heated debate across the country, especially when younger and older Australians are involved. This hostility can make it hard to see how important it is to work together to solve housing problems. But it's important to realize that fixing these housing problems is the public's best interest. Recent studies show that the crisis isn't just hurting people who want to buy a home, it's affecting people who already own a home. This shows that Australia's housing policy has changed from post-war programs that were meant to make homes affordable for most Australians to one that now heavily favors people who already own a home. I'm going to pause here just for a second to politely remind you that if you like our content, don't forget to show us your support by subscribing to the channel. Getting back to the topic, we all know that the housing market is not doing well throughout the world, but Australia definitely has it worse. For most people in the US, the median price to income number is just above 4. This can allow us to compare the global situation. Interestingly, it's just 3 towns in Australia that are among the most expensive in the world based on this ratio. In Melbourne, for instance, houses are priced at almost 10 times their typical income, and in Sydney, they are priced even higher. The recent rise in interest rates has made things harder for both renters and people with mortgages. A big part of Australians are on the verge of financial ruin because their living costs are eating up a big chunk of their income. Let's figure out what's going on with the housing market and learn from the past to help us understand it better today. So, back in the 18th century, physiocrats, which was the term for economists back in the day, focused on agriculture a lot. This means that land was a very important part of their equation when they were modeling the future economic prospects of a country. During the Industrial Revolution, many things changed, and the classical economists began to look at things in a broader way. At that point, land alone wasn't as important as part of their equation because other factors such as employment had also come into play. And now, in the modern age, capital efficiency is the single most important thing, and capital efficiency is simply a fancy way to talk about the return on your investment. If you think about it, you can only maximize the absolute return on your investment by having and investing more money. So in a way, the economic policies in the modern economic theory are very much biased towards someone who, say, already possesses a lot of wealth. And it's interesting that land, which used to be an important part of economics, has slowly faded into the background as other types of capital have grown. Policies like the capital gains tax discount and negative gearing have changed the economy we live in today. These policies favour wealthy people more than others, which raises housing prices without meaning to. In spite of their intentions to encourage investment, these policies have made it harder to find cheap homes for many Australians, leading to a housing shortage. It's incredibly scary how few rented homes there are in Australia. Availability is below 1%. Rents have gone through the roof, and young people and people with low means are being hit the hardest by this. It's very different from the 1990s, when it was easy to become a homeowner, and the average Australian only needed 7 years to save up for a down payment. These days, this time has almost doubled. It's becoming clearer that younger Australians are having a hard time saving for a down payment on a house. The housing affordability problem has its roots in major changes made to the job market and wages in the 1980s and 1990s. These changes led to a shift from the standard of stable full-time work, which was important for saving money and getting a mortgage. These days, it's hard for even smart young workers to buy their own homes. Of course, this has made people more reliant on parental help to get into the housing market, which has changed how families handle their money. Even though most people thought rental growth would slow down, the Australian property market has been strong despite economic problems. Notably, rents have gone up a lot in some places. In Sydney, Kensington has the highest growth rate at 24.9%, followed by Lakemba and Wiley Park. This trend shows that supply and demand will remain unequal, especially in places that people want to live. But this resilience isn't likely to stay the same all over the country. The State of the Nation's Housing Report 2022-23 talks about how the market might be getting better with slower capital growth and fewer transactions. But in 2024, the housing market might be rough because the unemployment rate is going up. GDP growth is slowing down, and family savings rates are at their lowest level since the global financial crisis. The most recent market trends do show that Australia's home market will be very different in 2024. Some places like Brisbane have fully recovered from downturns, but prices are almost at all-time highs in others, like Sydney and Melbourne. It's getting harder and harder for first-time buyers to get on the housing ladder because prices keep going up even though people think the market will go down. Of course, the Australian housing market's strength is mostly due to a serious lack of homes for sale, which has happened at the same time as fast population growth, making this problem even more urgent. The government's plan to build 1.2 million homes over the next 5 years is a step in the right direction, but it's still not clear what effect it will have right away. The problem has also been getting worse because interest rates have been going up over and over, making it harder to borrow money. At the same time, rich folks never have a problem borrowing money. They can borrow money, invest in properties, simply wait for the prices to go further up, and then get a tax rebate when selling that property for profit. So, even without taking into account of the profit they would make on the appreciation of value, the tax break alone makes it lucrative enough for them. The more money they have, the more they can do this over and over again, in turn making the crisis even worse. If we ponder about possible answers, the role of land in economic theories comes back to the fore. There are many economic experts out there who want to change how land is taxed, especially when it comes to land that investors own that isn't being used productively or aiding the economy. Similarly, there is an urgent need to increase the quantity of housing. Over time, land's function has changed, and it is now again an important part of our economy. This must be factored into the economic policy for it to have a positive impact on Australians who are not already very wealthy. For similar content, don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below.